Well, good morning, everyone. Got a deep, very serious question to ask everyone here today. What do you complain about? Now, notice I didn't say, do you complain? I said, what do you complain about? So let me just share something. I did a memorial service yesterday, and as I was kind of going through prepping for that, I kind of put in to perspective, I probably over the last 30 years have done well over 300 memorial services, funerals, different things like that, just because that's just part of my job. But I get to sit with families, and as I sit with families, they share about their loved one. And one of the more surprising things I've heard through the years is, Dad never complained. And I go, okay, I'm going to go ahead and write that down. But in my mind, I'm going, really? Because it's so odd that somebody would not complain about something. In fact, I think there's several things that we complain about. One of them would be government and politics, which is kind of low-hanging fruit, that kind of shows us how easy it is to fall into complaining. Sometimes it's your boss or coworker, or your job, and maybe sometimes it's family. It's your spouse. It's always their fault, right? Kids, parents, siblings, whatever it might be. It might be finances. It might be health and aches and pains and all of those things that come along with aging. I'm over 50 now, and I realize things just like I wake up in the morning and I kind of go, what did I do in my sleep? Get that. So that kind of stuff is just there. And so I'm going to go ahead and say it because this occasionally happens. I've been in the church world all of my adult life. Sometimes people complain about their church and their pastor. No. Yeah, just going to say. In fact, I heard a preacher say one time, I had to accept the fact that I'm talked about more than I am talked to. So that is just a reality that happens. So, hey, we're going to have an honest conversation about complaining today. Because there's actually, in Numbers chapter 11, there is what I'm going to say is a sequence of complaining. And it just goes, and it goes, and it goes, and it goes. And everything that is related to us, other than one item in the first 15 verses, really centers around complaining. And we don't really think of complaining as a sin, but God saw that it was sinful. But yet it's kind of like gossip. It's one of those things that we can fall into so very easily. And I'll even go as far as to say, as Americans, and we cherish our free speech, we believe that it is an inalienable right for us to complain. And so let's go ahead and read verses 1 through 3 and just kind of walk through this here today. It says, soon the people began to complain about their hardship. And the Lord heard everything they said. Then the Lord's anger blazed against them, and he sent fire to rage among them, and he destroyed some of the people on the outskirts of the camp. Then the people screamed to Moses for help, and when he prayed to the Lord, the fire stopped. After that, the area was known as Taberah, which means a place of burning, because fire from the Lord had burned among them there. Now, when people express their struggle with the Old Testament and the Old Testament God, this is one of those examples of people saying, I don't get this. I don't get a God who smites people, sends fire down from heaven to destroy people, and the people really kind of struggle with this. And I'm going to say sometimes I don't always have a good answer to that. But let's go ahead and camp here for a moment. And I'll go ahead and say what's maybe on some people's mind as they're going through a passage like this and God destroys people for complaining, we'll say it's just complaining, right? I mean, there's no violence here. There's no murder here. There's no immorality. There's no golden calf. There's no idolatry. It is just complaining. But I have to ask the question, if God is going to send fire from heaven when people complain, why would He react so strongly? Why would He react so strongly against complaining? Could it be that God knows what complaining does to our hearts? Could it be that God knows the infectious nature of complaining and how a little bit of complaining turns into a whole lot of complaining, and then all you got is complaining? And so, like for example, we find in verses 1 through 3, people were complaining about their hardship. I'll talk about that here in a few moments, but people were complaining about their hardship, and God sends fire down from heaven to smite people because they deserved smiting from God, okay? And you would think that maybe people would say, hey, let's stop complaining. But that's not what happened. In fact, in verses 4 through 6, we find, then the foreign rabble would have been those who were part of the Exodus, like they weren't necessarily Jewish people. They were still enslaved, and they left with the Jewish nation in that. But it says, then the foreign rabble who were traveling with the Israelites began to crave the good things of Egypt. And the people of Israel also began to complain, oh, for some meat. They exclaimed, we remember the fish we used to eat for free in Egypt. It wasn't free. And we had all the cucumbers, melons, leeks, onions, and garlic we wanted. But now our appetites are gone. All we ever see is this manna. And so what we find, let's just go ahead and look at this. They actually give us a quick breakdown of what manna was. Manna, by its actual term, means what is it? So they woke up in the morning, they see this like flaky stuff on the ground that kind of looks like coriander seeds, and they look at it and they go, what is it? And so God fed them, what is it? Like mystery meat casserole. Like every morning is kind of what it was. But they were complaining. So let's kind of follow the sequence of events here. People complain about their hardship. God destroys some people because they're complaining, and that leads to more complaining. And it starts with a little, and it becomes a lot. And all they're doing is complaining. And so what we find in verse 10 is actually more. Moses heard all the families standing in the doorways of their tents whining. And the Lord became extremely angry. Moses was also very aggravated. And so we're beginning to find a little bit about God's disposition toward complaining. It says he's angry at them. We're going to kind of unpack a lot of that here in a few moments, but I think we just need to hold on to that it turned into a massive gripe session. Anybody ever been in a situation where one person starts griping, then another person starts griping, and it's just it just happens that way. And so that's what's happening. And Moses then decides that it's now his turn. Okay, seriously, looking at verses 11 through 15, it says, and Moses said to the Lord, why are you treating me, your servant, so harshly? Have mercy on me. What did I do to deserve the burden of all these people? Did I give birth to them? Did I bring them into the world? Why did you tell me to carry them in my arms like a mother carries a nursing baby? How can I carry them to the land you swore to give to their ancestors. Where am I supposed to get meat for all these people? They keep whining to me, saying, give us meat to eat. I can't carry all these people by myself. The load is far too heavy. If this is how you intend to treat me, just go ahead and kill me now. Do me a favor and spare me this mercy. This is his Daffy Duck moment. Like Elijah, he had, as he was tired and he was worn out, and he was at the end of his rope. He basically said, God, kill me now. I'm done with this. We find Jonah had that exact same thing. God, kill me now. And now we find Moses actually predating those two examples of just kill me now. Now, if you look at like the big picture of these 15 verses, complaining gets a lot of press. So it's like all in this one moment in time. And this might have been over a matter of days or maybe even over a matter of weeks. But complaining is the prominent narrative. It's the dominant narrative of what was going on in the Israelite community at this point in time. So I believe it is important to ask this question, and we'll go ahead and bring this question back up here in a few moments. Why is God so opposed to complaining? Why is God so opposed to complaining? Now, I'm going to share with you, as I was prepping for my sermon Sunday night, and I was just kind of mulling things over in my mind. I call it ruminating. I was meditating on this particular passage. I typed out a note on my Apple Notes on my probably my laptop. The question that I just asked: why is God so opposed to complaining? And so I just spent some time. Grandkids had gone to bed. My wife was in bed, and I just spent some time answering that question. Got up the next morning, read my Bible, did my devotions, and I continued to answer, why is God so opposed to complaining? Now, I'm not going to share everything that I wrote down, but I'm going to share a large portion of that. So if you'd like to take notes, this might be the time to pull out your camera, because we're going to go through several different items that really kind of show this is why God is probably opposed to complaining. We're going to get to the heart of the matter, and one of them is complaining creates false narratives. I want you to think about that. Complaining creates false narratives. So it says that there were some who were complaining about their hardship. And so, again, we are a year removed from Egypt. So if you go back to Egypt, now, albeit they don't have traditional, like, stick-built homes, they're living in tents, but I asked them, and maybe God should have asked them, how is your life harder today than it was a year ago? Because a year ago you were enslaved. A year ago you worked for your food. A year ago things were not great. In fact, it was probably a situation that, if we remember the very first part of Exodus, God heard their cries. He heard their hardship. So this is a false narrative. And so the foreign rabble brings up, oh, how great it was in Egypt. And again, the people like, we had all the free fish to eat. Really? Was it free? Because you were paying with your life. And we had all this kind of food, and it was so wonderful and great, but you were slaves. That is a false narrative. And what we do when we complain, we become the victim, and somebody else is the villain. And sometimes that villain is God. Why is God doing this to me? Why doesn't God just let me have the life that I want? And, listen, I have sat with couples through the years. And I could share story after story after story after story where one of the spouses has developed this unrealistic false reality in their mind. Just completely. In fact, I sat with a couple one time, and the wife was angry that her husband was hanging out with his friends all the time. And so here's what I did. I asked the question. I said, can you give him an example of when he hangs out with his friends? And so she gave a specific example of him hanging out with his friends. And then I said, well, can you give him another one? And she sat there. And she thought. And she could not remember another time that he hung out with his friends. But it happened once. Now, maybe that once she needed him home with kids. Maybe that once she might have felt ignored. But the false reality of once became all the time. You see, when we want to complain, we can create a completely false narrative in our minds where we're the hero, where we're the victim, and everyone else is a villain. Now, I'm also going to say this, and again, we're going to go through 8 or 9 of these. Complaining is a contagion. Now you say, that's strong language, Brandon, and I'm like, it's meant to be strong language. Here's something I've noticed. I'm on Facebook. I choose not to do this anymore, but I used to, when I was angry about something, complain on Facebook. And here's what I noticed. If I complained about something, traffic, which, by the way, anybody had to sit in traffic? I mean, so you complain about traffic, whatever it might be. Anybody on East Mountain 411? The official gripe and complain page of the East Mountains of New Mexico is kind of what it really is. But so like you complain, and it is like you light a match. Now, you detonate a bomb for people to that just gives them permission to start complaining over and over and over. But you put out something positive, encouraging, kind of like K-Love. Anybody listen to K? Yeah, so anyway, sorry. Bad joke. It's like crickets. People don't respond to that. Hate, complaining, anger gets clicks. In fact, I'll even just share with you, we used to have a Valley View group when Facebook kind of first came out. Not a Valley View page, but a Valley View group. And we got rid of it, and one of the reasons why we got rid of it is like if one person put out even something like kind of generally complaining, it was like that gave everybody the opportunity to start complaining. In fact, I've seen it in the church. Maybe you've seen it in the workplace or even in your family. Listen, a complaint of one can become the complaint of a few, which can become the complaint of many. That's why it's a contagion. And I'm going to tell you, your news source understands how to manipulate emotion to react with anger and give you the permission to complain. They want to give you something to complain about. Now, also, I'm just going to share this. Complaining is selfish. In fact, all sin at some level is selfish. It involves pride. But when Moses, in fact, I counted, and I hope my count is right, when Moses reacted to God by complaining. Now, I think it's important to say he complained to God, which we'll talk about here in a moment. But when he complained, he referred to himself as he was talking to God in the first person 15 times. So that's a clue that Moses had made it all about himself. And when we complain, we make it all about ourselves. My boss, my boss, he just hates me. He has it in for me. That's what people say here. No, I'm just kidding. My husband doesn't value me. My husband doesn't love me. My wife doesn't appreciate me. And again, we make it all about ourselves. Listen, since I was preaching on complaining this week, I decided to be more mindful of my internal dialogue. And actually, I'm just going to be honest with you, this week was probably more difficult than most weeks. And like, we have 4 grandkids in the house. Like, we went from 2 people that are pretty self-sufficient to like 6, and 4 of them, like I said, they want 3 square a day. I don't understand. But and then Terry ended up sick and not feeling well, and so that put more of the burden on me and different things like that, and I became the hero, right? So it's easy to do that, and it's like, well, I hope she appreciates everything that I'm doing around here. Yeah, okay. So anybody with me? And how easily we can go into that. And so what I kind of came up with is my internal dialogue, if I feel even an inkling of complaining, is really all about myself. It's pride. And it doesn't have really anything to do with other people. It has everything to do with me. Now, along with pride and selfishness, I'm going to say complaining is dramatic and exaggerated. Think about Moses. Like they were complaining about their hardships. So sometimes life is meant to be hard, and so they're like, "Why is And then like, I want the food of Egypt, but do you want the slavery? All right." But when Moses is complaining to God, he's like, why? I didn't give birth to these people, and why have you brought me to, like, why do I have to carry the burden here? And if this is the way it's going to be, just go ahead and kill me now. And it's very melodramatic, very exaggerated. I'll even go as far as to say, drama much, Moses? Like, you got to turn it down a little bit here. And when we complain, we tend to do that. We tend to ramp up the emotion. Now, I'll also go ahead and say this. Complaining is a symptom of a deeper spiritual problem. So if you find yourself complaining, maybe a quick self-evaluation of, is there something else going on that is causing my heart to be agitated right now? Again, in fact, I have 5 questions that I ask myself, and I have 5 questions that somebody comes to me and says, things are just kind of out of kilter right now. They're just, like, it just doesn't feel right. Like, I will ask people 5 questions, and these 5 questions have to do with God creating us as whole people, and as whole people, everything in our body can work together. So I will ask the question, number 1, is there a sin? Like lust of the eyes, lust of the flesh, pride of life. Is there a sin that you might be struggling with right now that is causing you to be more negative in the way that you are seeing the world, which is maybe leading to complaining? Or how is your walk? Like, how's your quiet time? How's your Bible study? How's your prayer? How's fellowship with other people? Like, how is your walk doing? Now, also, how is your sleep? People who are sleep deprived are cranky. Seriously. That's what God created, rest. Okay? So it might be, it could be even as simple as a sleep issue. How is your diet? Listen, I'll be the first to tell you, like, if I eat too many carbs, I feel lousy. Just period. And so there might be certain things within a diet that could be making you feel lethargic and just not good. How is your exercise? So there's certain things, again, it might be a symptom of a deeper issue that is going on that is causing your attitude to drift toward complaining. Here is another one. Complaining, like most sin, wastes valuable time and energy. In the Old Testament, there's that question or that statement, teach me the number of my days. And that's really saying that we have, like, God has our days planned out for us. He knows the number of our days. He knows how long we're going to be here on this planet. And we all have a finite number of days. Complaining is a poor use of the time that God has given us here on this earth. And listen, I realize, in fact, I think how much of my life is spent complaining, and that is a waste of the life that God has given me because it's not encouraging to other people. It doesn't build other people up. In fact, many times, if you notice that Moses, it says he was aggravated at all of their complaining. And that's one of the things that can happen is that it's just a poor use of our time. Also with that, complaining focuses on temporary circumstances. I mean, they were complaining about food. Think about how much time do we spend worrying about food, and how much time do we actually spend eating it? And their complaints were about temporary things. I think a lot of the items that we deal with are temporary. In fact, from the grand scheme of eternity, you go to 2 Corinthians chapter 4 and verse 17, where it discusses that our light and momentary afflictions are preparing for us an eternal weight of glory. In other words, what we walk through here on this earth, no matter what it is that we walk through, is temporary. But yet we spend so much of our time focused on the temporary, focused on that which is not going to carry into eternity. Here's another one. This is going to be our final one in this particular list. Complaining eliminates the God card. Do you think about that? Sovereignty is the idea that God works out His plan providentially through even the sinfulness of man. So everything going on in the world today that we can kind of look at and focus in on, and everything going on in our lives means that God is doing something. All works, for the good of all, for Him and His glory, and He works all things toward His glory and His good. Now, here's one of the things that when I'm complaining about temporary circumstances, I'm not giving my mind the space to think maybe God is up to something. Maybe God is doing something. This difficult thing, the boss that is writing me too hard, the spouse that I'm fighting with, whatever it might be, God might be and probably is doing something behind the scenes that I cannot see. And if I'm complaining about it, I don't give space to say, maybe God is up to something. In fact, I'll even go as far as to say, listen, please don't hear what I am not saying. But we complain about our political environment. We complain about the global affairs that are going on. We complain about all of these different things. Gas prices are too high. Food prices are too high. Whatever it may be. Do we ever stop to consider that God is setting the stage for future things? But we never stop to really think about that, especially if we spend all of our time complaining. So, why is God, I'm going to ask this again, why is God so opposed to complaining? Now, I'll just give you our bottom line here for today. Complaining makes us blind to the goodness of God. When we complain, we become incapable of seeing the good things that God has brought into our lives. In fact, when we complain and we're focused completely on the negative, we have the inability to see that there might be anything positive going on in this. And so thinking about this, okay, so why is God so opposed to this? We don't get to see Him and all His glory and all His goodness when we're focused in on it. Sometimes the legitimate junk in our life, but we never realize what God might be doing. So, I'm going to give you a few challenges today. A few challenges when it comes to complaining. One of them is rewire your brain. Because here's the deal, especially when it comes to social media. The more you complain, the more little red dots you're going to get, the more your mind is going to say complain more, because that's cool to get all those responses and likes. Complaining creates the wrong neural pathways in our brain. And actually, if you know anything about the brain science and the way our mind works and neuroplasticity and different things like that, it actually, complaining can kind of create trenches in our minds. Then it's hard to get out of. So here's a challenge here. Write down this week, and this is going to be a stretch, 10 reasons to be thankful each day. If you journal, in fact, we have these little journals available. Some of you have already picked them up. They're out at the connection point. But it might be a great thing to start journaling, writing out your prayers, whatever it may be. But maybe this week, you just write out Monday. Or even today, go home. Write out 10 reasons to be thankful. Train your mind to go away from complaining and see the goodness of God in your life. Also, with your heart, take the path of prayer over complaining. In fact, I think about 1 Peter. 1 Peter, he says, give all your worries and cares to God, for He cares about you. So the idea is we're going to walk through uncomfortable circumstances in life. We're going to walk through circumstances we prefer not to walk through. Peter says, take those and give those over to God. He does care for you. In fact, I'm going to read a psalm here this morning, an entire psalm, only 6 verses. But we're going to find that the psalmist brings his complaints to God. And we're going to see something pretty cool, though, that as he brings his complaints, how he ends. O Lord, how long will you forget me? Forever? How long will you look the other way? How long must I struggle with anguish in my soul, with sorrow in my heart every day? How long will my enemy have the upper hand? Turn and answer me, oh my God, restore the sparkle to my eyes, or I will die. See, this is a little bit dramatic. This is a vivid language here. He says, don't let my enemies gloat, saying, we have defeated him. Don't let them rejoice at my downfall, but I trust in your unfailing love. Did you see the shift? Brought his complaint, but yet he says, but I trust in your unfailing love. I will rejoice because you have rescued me. In other words, I expect that you will make sense of whatever it is that I am walking through right now. I will sing to the Lord because He is good to me. I don't like the circumstances that I am walking through, but God is still good. And I expect that He will be good to me, that there will be something of value that will come through whatever it is that I am walking through. That is the value of prayer, because you can come and you take the focus off of yourself and you put it on God. So take the path of prayer. And then this, let your speech always, in fact, this is our hands here. Let your speech always be gracious, seasoned with salt, so that you may know how you ought to answer each person. Paul is encouraging the church to talk differently than what they've grown accustomed to doing. And through our speech, we can be a light to the world. We can be different in the way that we talk. We can be different in the things that we talk about. And when we do, when our speech is actually, it talks about agreeable, pleasant, that's something that can point people like, why do you talk so different? Why don't you complain? Why don't you gripe? Why don't you criticize everything that is going on around you? Because I know that my Redeemer lives. I know that whatever it is that I am walking through right now is not the end of the picture. That's not the end of the story. So let your speech always be gracious and seasoned with salt. Will you join me in prayer? Father in heaven, thank you. God, you are good, and you are gracious. And Father, may we shift our minds away from the circumstances that we walk through in life, and may we focus on your goodness. Whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable, whatever is praiseworthy, Lord, may we be mindful of that. Thank you in Jesus' name. Amen.